Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today's video is one that I'm pretty excited about because I'm in a peppy mood, and when I'm in a peppy mood I try and film these more casual vlog style videos. And today's casual vlog style video is going to focus on following a Hollywood pattern, specifically number 1996. That's a year before I was born. I'm going to be doing the short sleeve version of this, and I picked this pattern up at an antique market in Pennsylvania. I like the dolman style sleeves, or fake dolman style sleeves since this looks like it has a cuff to it. I also liked the darted bodice and the button down front. I find that is so much more easy and comfortable to get on and off compared to something that has a side placket closure, which was very common in the 1940s. So I'm looking forward to following this, and I'm going to be following it twice, because when you're following a pattern you've never followed before, nothing could possibly go wrong, so you might as well do it several times over in the same day. And that's what I'm going to be doing, or at least attempting to do. And the fabrics I have for this is part of the Celebrate collection at Joann's. Not a sponsor, I'm just a big fan of these fabrics. They're 42-inch wide quilting cottons, but they feel a little bit rougher than most quilting cottons in a good way that makes them more apparel-y weight feeling to me. And they are a gradient from a very dense star print on one edge to an almost completely black portion in the middle. So it'll fade up the dress and then back into the star print towards the waist, and I think it's going to be really interesting and hopefully quite flattering. I am going to have to waste a bit of fabric to fussy cut this out the way I want it to be over the shoulders, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice. So that is one fabric, and that's the fabric that I originally envisioned this pattern with. And then the other day I was at Joann's and they had their Halloween fabrics in, because it is July and of course they have their Halloween fabrics in, and I fell in love with this one. I've actually purchased a yard of this fabric before last Halloween, right after Halloween. They had all of their Halloween fabrics on clearance, and this one was reduced down to like $2 a yard, but they only had 1 yard left of it, which isn't really enough to do anything with, but I bought for some reason anyway. And then I saw that this year they had it again, so I decided to buy 4 yards of it, and I just think it would be cool made out of this dress, and since I'm already making one, I might as well make another, right? So I'm going to get these both cut out at the same time, though first I have to go through and make sure all the pattern pieces are there and iron them because they haven't actually done that yet. And we'll just go on this construction journey together. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about Italian visas, because that is what has consumed my every thought over the past week. For a minute there, I was concerned that I didn't have all the pieces, but it turns out that I do. They were very wrinkled, and it's quite the process getting them flat, but I think I managed to accomplish it. I haven't actually double-checked the piece count, but I think they're all there. And if they're not, then we might have to draft our own pieces, which would be exciting. So they say to finish the edges by turning them inward and stitching them down, or pinking the edges, or turning the edges inward and whip stitching them down. However, this is me we're talking about, so I'm going to try and stitch it with French seams, and I think that's going to give a nicer finish. It doesn't look too complicated in terms of seaming. The seams for the skirt are relatively straight, so they should be easy to sew as French seams. And then there are just the side seams for the bodice. And the seam for the sleeves, because I've decided that I'm going to try and add sleeves if I have enough fabric, just because this is more of an autumn wintry print. I think it makes sense for the dress to have sleeves, and I don't have very many dresses with sleeves. That means when I'm cutting this out, I have to leave room for a half-inch addition around all the pieces. Except for this piece, because it is the front, and I'm not going to be French seaming the center front since it has the button placement. I think it's going to be complicated. So I guess I can tell my Italy story, which I mentioned in a previous video and got questions about, and I hope this doesn't come off as sounding entitled, because that's really not my intention. But anyway, I was recently contacted by someone on Instagram who were a museum hosting a class that was taught by my favorite costume designer, or one of my favorite costume designers, who actually designed the costumes for one of my favorite TV shows, and it was that TV show and their work that got me into historical costumes and pursuing it more seriously and actually trying my hand at it. So this is someone I admire greatly, and they were teaching a class in Italy over the course of 3 months all about costume design. And I didn't go to college because I couldn't find one that was teaching classes that really interested me. And this interested me to a degree that literally nothing else has. Now, when I first heard about it, I was immediately like, I can't go. It's in Italy. That's really scary. I'm someone who has anxiety. I can't go. And then I was thinking more about it, and, you know, I'm in my early 20s, and I feel like this is the time to do something like that, and I shouldn't let fears and insecurities about my abilities to travel let me potentially miss out on the opportunity of a lifetime. So I started considering it more seriously. I found a place where I could stay that was within my budget. I realized that flights I could pay for. I could afford the course itself, even though it was very expensive. and the fact that they had reached out to me made me think I had a good chance of getting in. Actually, in fact, when they first contacted me, I thought it was like an invitation to be in the course, but I would have still had to apply, which is fine. So I asked them quite a few questions, and I figured out where I could stay and everything. And then I started looking into visas, because if you are American, you can stay in Italy and several other countries for up to 90 days without having a specific visa. But the course was like 3 months and 9 days. And I asked them several times if it could be completed in less time than that, and they didn't get back to me. So I'm assuming the answer is no. But since the course is over 3 months, you obviously have to be there for more than 3 months, which means you need to get a national visa. And this is like what people who want to move to Italy get, I gather. So it's a little bit more intense than I was expecting, and the process to get one is a little bit more rigorous than I was expecting. I'm willing to jump through a lot of hoops. Like, I don't mind it being a complicated process. It's their right to make it as complicated as they want it to be. So there's no judgment or annoyance from me. But I was reading reviews for people trying to get this visa, and they were talking about getting declined because they didn't have their bank statements ordered enough. And then when you looked at the documents required for your visa appointment, they didn't even mention bank statements. So it's kind of like they have all these rules that they don't tell you about, and that infuriates me. You also can't apply for this visa more than 90 days ahead of your trip, but it can take up to 90 days for the visa to process and for you to actually receive it and be able to go. So there are just a lot of unknowns with the visas that made me really uncomfortable. And to get the visa, you also have to show your flights and proof of residence while you're staying in Italy, which means you have to book your housing and your flights before you even know if you'll get a visa that will allow you to go there. And housing for 3 months in Italy is not cheap, which means you could potentially be losing thousands upon thousands of dollars if the visa doesn't go through. And to apply for this course, you need to have proof that you'd applied for a visa. So to get into this course, you have to apply for that visa, and to get the visa, you have to book your hotel and your flight, and then you might not even get into the course. And if you do get into the course, there's still a chance the course will be canceled if they don't get enough participants. So you could have paid for this visa, which is a couple $100s, paid for your flights and hotel, which are obviously thousands of dollars, and then the class, who is taking potential candidates up to a week before the class starts, could cancel last minute if they don't get enough people, and you could lose out on all that money. So there were just too many unknowns for me to move forward with it, but it was really sad because it was basically this dream opportunity, and I think like my excitement and my willingness to make this work shows because I'm such an anxious human being, yet I still did all that research and put all that consideration to potentially going. And bonus, even if your visa is accepted and I got there, once you get there, within like 8 days, you have to go to the post office and get a packet, which obviously is in English, which is fine, you're in a foreign country, that you have to fill out, and then you have to pay for your insurance, and then you have to go to a smoke shop to acquire a stamp, which is like 15 euros or something, and then you have to bring all of that back to the post office, who then book you an appointment with the police station where you have to go and get fingerprinted, and after that you will get your residence visa or whatever within 90 days. So it is just like this huge process, and again, it's not so much what you have to do that bothers me, it's the fact that it isn't outlined anywhere in a clear way that I feel I could confidently follow. It's all just kind of information that I cobbled together from reading various other people's experiences, which makes me really uncomfortable with having to attempt to do it myself. So that's why I'm not going to Italy, and it's very, very sad, but I think it was the right decision given everything. I think I have miraculously managed to add all of the French themes I was supposed to while talking throughout this video. Nope, fabric, come back. Forgot to put my weights on it. I'm trying this bulletproof coffee thing, which is basically coffee with several tablespoons of compressed coconut milk, I guess. So you're having this coffee that's like 81% fat, and it's supposed to keep you full like all day long and keep you really focused. So everyone in my family has been trying it for breakfast, and I have to say, it doesn't work. I'm very hungry. And it's only like 10 o'clock, and I had it at 8 o'clock, so this does not bode well for getting me until lunchtime. Coffees also make me feel a little sick, so that's not great either. Oh shoot, I just cut off the seam allowance. Alright. And I'm trying to add an inch to the bottom edge of all these panels, just because patterns usually run a little short on me. And so do dresses in general. Oh, the woes of being 5'10". I don't understand why clothing is modeled on people who are 5'10" when it is made for people who are like 5'6". And one of the sneaky things they do is they put models in larger sizes and then they pin back so they get the length of the larger size, but it's pinned to fit them. So then, when you're actually tall and you buy a dress, it shows up and it's way shorter on you than it looked on the model, and it's very annoying. Trust me, I've lived this life for a long time. I've been 5'10" since I was 13. It's kind of funny, when I was 13, I told my mom that I wanted to stop growing, and I stopped growing. Like, I didn't get any taller, my feet didn't grow, it was fabulous. And she says that I willed myself to stop getting taller. Now for this fabric, I'm not going to cut it out like this, because then the pieces would end up being a gradient from left to right, whereas I want to be a gradient from top to bottom. So that means I have to fold it differently. That's what I wanted. And I think I'm gonna cut out the skirt pieces first. And then, like with the other fabric where I had to worry about bats being upside down, this one I can alternate the way the pieces are going, which means they take less fabric to cut out. And I also don't have to worry about forgetting about French seams, since I'm cutting around the back fabric, which has the French seams included. This is not the most effective use of fabric, but as I said in the beginning, I'm just going to fussy cut this out so the print lines up where I want it to be. So now it is time for the pieces that must be cut on a fold. This piece, which will form the back of the skirt, and then a little piece for the facing. And this is going to be our last piece. Isn't that exciting? I find that exciting. So now I'm going to go through and notch all the pieces, and then I'm going to start trying to get the skirt panels together, since that will be sort of time consuming and annoying, given that I'm sewing them all with French seams. But it should still be the easiest part of this, because I don't have to worry about pleats and buttonholes and all of that stuff that will need to be marked on the bodice panels. So skirts first, and then move into the complicated stuff. Alright, so these are the pocket pieces, and I just pinned them together with the right sides facing each other. And I'm going to sew all the way around them, except leave maybe 3 inches open so I can easily turn them right side out. And that's going to quickly finish all of the edges, and then those now finished edges can be top stitched onto some of the skirt panels. So I'm thinking for the bat version I'm going to make a little applique in the shape of a bat out of some wool and stitch that on as well. I'm not sure how that would end up looking, but I think that would be a really cute little detail. But I'll figure that out after sewing it together. So that was what I'm going to do now, and then I also have all of the skirt panels prepped for the beginning stages of French seams. So I made this little bat template that I showed you earlier just by tracing a royalty-free image I found online. And then I traced that onto something called Heat and Bond, which is like double-sided fusible interfacing, except it's not interfacing, it's just glue. So I traced my image onto that, and then I ironed it onto one side of this wool fabric. And the wool felt, so it doesn't really fray, but I'm still going to stitch around the edges by hand. And now I can just cut this out, and then I can peel the papery side off, which preserves one side of the glue, so you can iron it on the first time. And I'll be able to stick it onto my pocket pieces for the skirt, which I'm ready to do since I've finished sewing all these skirt pieces together. It's just the front seam that's left to be done up, and I'm going to wait to do that until after the button panel thing is done, which I don't fully understand how to do, but I told myself I was finishing the skirt before I was moving into the bodice, so I don't really have to worry about it yet. I can worry about it after I've sewn the bats on. And I think I'm going to use little red rhinestones or sequins as eyes. I think that would be really funny. So that is my little bat. And then I'm just going to take a pin and use that to score the paper so I can peel the papery side off. And now you should be able to see how shiny it is. That's the glue. And there it is after fusing it on. It doesn't show up quite as much as I thought it would, but I'm going to stitch around it by hand, and hopefully that will make it a little bit more defined. And I think it'll be a cute little addition to the dress anyway. So now I have to do that, and I also have to sew on the pockets for the confetti dress because those aren't going to get any fancy appliques, so I can go ahead and stitch them on. I don't know if I showed you guys what the back pockets looked like once I finished them, but here you can see them in all their glory with little red pearl eyes, and I've also whip stitched around all the edges so they won't lift up if the glue degrades over time. So then I sewed them on, and now the skirt portion of this is finished. I've also made quite a bit of progress on the bodice, so I ended up transferring all of the markings from the paper onto the bodice. That involved tucks, 2 on each side, darts, 1 at the front, 1 at the back, and then 2 tucks at the back as well. So I marked all of those for both dresses, and I sewed all of them, and I also sewed up the shoulder seam with a French seam, and the side seam with a French seam, and then I sewed the facing in. And in the instructions, they want you to completely sew down and finish the facing before sewing on the skirt. Then it wants you to fold in the portion for the skirt separately, and then you're going to end up with them meeting in a seam. It's just not going to look very nice. So what I'm going to do instead is sew the facing on, and I'm not going to secure it until after sewing the skirt on, and then I'm going to fold the portion of the skirt that's meant to be a button facing inward at the same time as the facing added to the bodice. Not sure if that makes sense, but I will show it to you. Also, when I tried to pin these two together, I realized that the skirt was way too big to pin onto the bodice. Or not way too big, but big by about 2 inches. So what I'm doing is adding a little pleat behind the pocket. That causes the pocket to poof out a little bit, which I actually don't mind because it makes it more visible. Without that, you can't even really tell that there's a pocket there. So that is my plan for that, and now I'm just going to go ahead and pin them together. And I'm feeling relatively confident in this because this is what the confetti dress looks like. So here you can see it in all its glory. I don't really love this belt with it. I really need to buy a nice black belt. I might look on Poshmark tonight. But as you can tell, the pockets are on, the facing is in. It's not sewn in yet, it's just pinned in place. So I wanted to do a fitting with it pinned in place to see what it would look like. And so far, I'm very, very happy. And I think the print of this dress is really neat. So I'm going to move along with this and get the facing for the other dress pinned, and then I'm going to sew both of them, and then we can come back upstairs and work a little bit on the sleeves and such. Actually, speaking of sleeves, I did get the cuffs for the bodice sleeves gathered, then I got them sewn on to the cuff, and then I got them sewn up with a French seam. It was all really easy to do, so I didn't film the process. And the cuffs got folded inward and pinned down to the portion where they were seamed on, and now those need to be whip stitched in place. So that's another hand sewing task I can do once I accomplish a little bit more on my dresses. I like doing all the hand sewing at once, and then it's just done and out of the way. So it's a couple days later now. Yesterday I was very sick. I've been trying something called bulletproof coffee, which is where you have coffee with a lot of fat in it, and it's supposed to suppress cravings and appetite. And it works a little bit, but it also made me very, very ill yesterday. And then this morning I felt quite sick too. So I need to figure out that. But anyway, I haven't gotten a lot of work done over the past couple days. However, I did manage to completely sew in the facings for both dresses. So the next step, though I forgot to sew on the carriers for this dress, they have to be tacked at the top as well as at the bottom, and then they function as belt loops. So I still need to do that for that one, but that dress is completely finished in terms of hand sewing. So now I can sew the sleeves onto that one and sew the cat sleeve cuff thing onto this one as well. And as far as buttons go, I'm using these ones for the back dress. And then I was going to use metal ones for this dress, but I was at Joann's yesterday and they had these star buttons and I thought they were perfect. So I ended up getting a couple of those to use for this dress, and then I also picked up some single fold bias binding so I can trim the hem and finish it with that all nice and pretty. So as I said, the next step is going to be just sewing down the carriers, and then I'm probably going to sew all the buttonholes off camera. I have decided to skip the bottom buttonhole just because the way I ended up sewing this together, it laps a little strangely, and that buttonhole is pretty unnecessary. So I'm just going to skip over it and sew the rest of them with black thread using my Singer Heavy Duty, which I have a review about. If you haven't seen the video about all my sewing machines, I will link it somewhere on screen. And now back to hand sewing and buttonholes. So I got a little bit ahead of myself. In addition to sewing all the buttonholes, I also sewed all the buttons on. And then like I said I would, I sewed the belt carriers on as well. So I'm really happy with how this looks. I think the buttons are a really cute addition, and I definitely like them more than just doing plain gold buttons. They might be a little bit tacky, but I don't know. They're very in the 1940s theme in my eyes. And then this is what the Halloween dress is looking like, and I ended up using red buttons on this to highlight the red in the eyes of the bat, which I don't know if you can even see, but I thought that would be a cute little addition. I could just see pairing it with this belt and a pair of red shoes and having that be really striking. So that's what I've ended up doing, and I'm very happy with the fit on this. It's probably a little bit big for me in the bodice, but I'm okay with that. I don't think it looks bad or anything. It's more of like a flouncy shirtwaist style that was more popular in the 1950s and the 1940s, just with this fit. But again, I'm okay with that. And I think the neckline, you can't see it because my hair is so awful right now, but I think this is a really nice neckline, and it's not too stuffy. It doesn't feel like it's strangling me or anything. It's just nice and kind of flattering. So I'm really, really happy with this. I'm also quite happy with the length. I'm probably going to leave this dress relatively long and just hem it by a 1/2 inch. And it doesn't look like I need to trim the hem. It's all hanging pretty level. So I'm probably just going to trim maybe a 1/4 inch off the bottom to get rid of any frayed threads. And then I will sew my bias binding on and fold it inward by about a 1/2 inch. And that will be a 1 inch in total hem. So it won't get too much shorter. I also have to make the shoulder pads, and then I obviously have to sew the sleeves on and sew the cuffs on. So I think I might make the shoulder pads first, just so those are done and out of the way, and then I will move on to attaching the sleeves, which is my least favorite part of most projects. And also sewing the binding onto the hem, as I said I would. So I'm just working on the shoulder pads. They said in the instructions to cut a 10-inch diameter circle and then sew the edges together and stuff that to create shoulder pads, but I don't really like creating shoulder pads out of stuffing as I find it tends to bunch up and they become uneven over time, especially with frequent washing. So I cut out 11-inch diameter circles of muslin, and then I cut out 4 pieces of quilting batting that get progressively smaller towards the center. When folded in half, you have one edge that is relatively thick, about a 1/2 inch thick, and then the edges taper down to nothing. So now I'm going to sew around these with a zigzag stitch and then trim the edges with pinking shears. Then they'll be ready to be installed in the garments, after I sew the sleeves on at least. So I have 4 shoulder pads complete, which is enough for both dresses. This is what they look like finished, and they should hold up really well. I've made pairs similar to this before and washed them dozens of times and still had them come out looking perfect. So I'm relatively hopeful that these will be okay. The only difference is that I usually cut shoulder pads as a square and then fold it in half so it forms a triangle, but these were done as a circle. So it's just a little bit different, but it should hold up all the same. So then I created the cap sleeves, which is pretty easy. However, I thought you just need to cut out one layer of the capped sleeve and then fold it in half. That was not the case. You need to cut out 2 pieces for each sleeve and stitch them together so the bottom edge is neatly finished, which is what I have now done. And then I did up the side seam while it was laid flat, and then I folded it in half. And I also folded the inner edge in half with my iron by a 1/2 inch, since that will be stitched to the interior, as you can see here. So that means I don't have to worry about getting it evenly folded inward after it's sewn onto the garment, since it's already pre-folded into position. So eventually these will have to be sewn onto the dress in a similar manner to how they're laid out here. But my dad is about to get home and I want to do some hand sewing in front of the TV because Alone is on. So what I'm going to do is hem these. So I'm just going to give the hem a really shallow trim, even up some points where the hem isn't level, and also trim off any frayed threads like you see here. And then I'm going to stitch my bias binding a 1/4 inch away from the bottom edge of the hem. And then I'm going to iron it inward by a 1/2 inch or so. So I will get a neat curved hem all the way around. And then obviously the top edge of the bias binding will be whip stitched down by hand. And this is what the other one looks like. I think I explained why I chose red buttons for this. It's because they match the bat's eye and I thought it would be a nice bit of contrast compared to the black ones. I can just picture it with a bright red pair of shoes and I think it's going to be wonderful. And then before I get to sewing, I just wanted to show you I have new unicorn editions. I got this cardboard unicorn thing from ModCloth and I love it. It doesn't look as good from the front as it looks from the side, but I think it's really great. And I'm probably going to cut some fancy scrapbooking paper to put behind it so it looks like it's mounted. I also wanted to mention this, which was sent to me by someone named Cherish, and it came all the way from Arizona. She said she found it in an antiques shop and thought it belonged to my sewing room alongside my ladyhead vases. And I completely agree because it's got this pearlescent sheen to it, which matches the ladyhead vase perfectly. So I'm going to send her a message, but that was such a sweet thing. Doesn't it look great here? It blends right in with my other old lady decor. So I really, really appreciate that. But do you know something I don't appreciate? Making bobbins. And that's what I have to do before this next step. And I'm not excited about it. Just had a little issue where the bungee cord that secures the tubes coming out of my iron had come undone and was pulling the power bar off the wall, which is not what you want to have happen. I'm so excited. Yesterday when I was at Joann's, I bought fabric to recover my ironing board. I don't remember if I showed it to you, but I bought a bunny fabric and a unicorn fabric, and I let people on Instagram vote which one I should use, and they voted for the bunny fabric. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this portion of the ironing board out of a purple fabric, so then all of these marks, these soot marks from my iron, won't be visible. And I'm also going to use multiple layers of fabric there and use a heat protectant fabric there so it won't shred like this, because this iron is so insanely hot that it's really done a number on the material this cover is made out of. but I love this iron, so I'm not complaining. So now both hems are folded inward and they are officially ready to be sewn. So I'm going to do that by hand, watch some survival television because I'm really into that for some reason, and update you when I'm done, and it's time for sleeves and shoulder pads, my least favorite parts. And I'm not intentionally leaving them until last, but it's just a happy accident that I haven't had to deal with them thus far. Alright, so I just finished sewing these sleeves on to both of the dresses, which I'm very happy about. Sleeves are always my least favorite part, or pretty much always my least favorite part. And I decided to do them off camera just so you wouldn't have to see me fighting with them. So they went together pretty easily. So for the dress with the cap sleeves, you can probably see where the facing starts and the sleeve ends. So the sleeve is the part that is really densely printed with the stars, and then the blacker part is the facing. So that turns inward and will be whip stitched to the line where I stitched the sleeve on. This is the seam allowance for sewing the sleeve on, and when the facing is folded inward, it will neatly cover that and can be sewn down. So I'm just going to pin this, and then I will get to sewing it by hand. The other dress, the sleeves are completely sewn on, so it's time to add shoulder pads. So here are my shoulder pads, and here is my dress in need of shoulder pads. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold the shoulder pad in half, and then this will be lined up with the seam of the shoulder, and you always want the tapered part going to your neck. You're building up the outer edge of your shoulder, not the inner edge. That was something I, believe it or not, didn't know when I first started sewing, and I totally put them in jackets the wrong way. And I'm just lining up that fold in the shoulder pad with the seam allowance, as I said, and I'm making sure to pin one end, and I'm making sure that about half an inch extends past the end of the sleeve, since that's what's most common. And for this one, I just want to sew it or tack it at those 2 points, so those are the only points I'm going to be pinning. And I'm just going to repeat this for the other side. And sometimes with shoulder pads, if I'm really particular about the placement, I like putting the garment on my dress form inside out, and then pinning the shoulder pads on that way, and that really allows me to see the shape it will create when it's worn while I'm doing it, which I like. So they're pinned in, so now I'm going to try this on and see what I think of the shape, and then I can get to tacking them in place. I'd say that they're positioned well, so I'm going to go ahead and tack them in place. And I haven't done up all my buttons, but just ignore that. It does a good enough idea of showing you the fit. Now I'm just leaving the pins in the garment, and I will go ahead and sew it on. Look at how much thread I've used up from my trip to Joann's less than a week ago. Everything I've been working on recently has been black, and it's really gone through it quick. So I'm using 2 strands of thread to tack down the shoulder pads, just because then it's a little bit stronger. And I'm leaving the pins in while I do this. I'm just going to sew a few little crosses to tack it in place. And that's all you really need. And as I said earlier, since these are made out of quilt batting and cotton, they are completely washable. They shouldn't shrink or break down really over time the way that they would if they were made out of batting, or if I was using foam molded shoulder pads, which aren't machine washable either. So that's one side done, or one side of one of the sides. And the other side I'm actually sewing just to the seam allowance from sewing the arm seam. Sleeve seam, not the arm seam. The arm seam is created in the womb. That is one tack down, and now I can go ahead and remove my pins, and I'm just going to repeat that process on the other side. And I'm going to do it while watching a Proper People video, because I have been supporting their Patreon for probably a year now, yet I haven't watched any of their videos in that time span, so I have a whole lot to catch up on, and I'm really enjoying it. They're an urban exploring channel on YouTube. If you haven't seen their videos, you should, because they're really interesting and well shot and kind of calming but creepy, and I can't watch them right before bed, but I really enjoy them when I do watch them. And now I think I'm going to do the rest of the sewing off camera, but I will be back when both dresses are done. Also, I think I forgot to show you the hem, but that is what it looks like. It's all neatly whip stitched by hand, and it didn't take very long at all. So that was pretty easy, and the sleeves were pretty easy, and overall it's just been a pretty easy project. I feel very blessed and kind of surprised by it. So I just finished adding the shoulder pads to this one, and it looks a little Star Trek-y to me. There's just so much extension in the shoulders, and these flare out like wings as opposed to really sticking to the shape of the shoulder, and I just don't think it's all that flattering or nice looking. So I've actually cuffed them a little bit, and I think that looks way better. So I'm probably going to tack the cuffs in place at some point so I don't have to iron this every time I want to wear it. But for the sake of photos tomorrow, I'll probably just iron it in place so it looks nice and they look even. I also like how this adds a little bit of the darker tone trim. I just think it's a nice touch, and I think this dress overall looks really nice. I found a belt to go with it, and I'm just very pleased with how the print and the gradient worked out. It's pretty much exactly what I'd envisioned, and I think the fit of it and overall shape of it is just really flattering and nice. So I really like both these dresses, and I really enjoyed working on them. I definitely like this pattern. I didn't pay that much attention to the instructions, so I can't really share my thoughts on them. But so far, both Hollywood patterns I've followed, I've been really impressed with the design and the simplicity in the way that they go together, and just the effectiveness of the way that they're pieced. Like, I think this belt carrier / pocket thing is just so clever and so easy to do, and I find their patterns quite inspiring in a way. So let me know if you like the star one, or if you like the batty one. I'd be very curious to know. Hi guys! So I'm just jumping on the end here to include some more photos so you can see this dress in all of its glory from a distance and not in my mirror. I think this does them a bit more justice, and as I said earlier, I hope you guys like how they turned out, and I definitely want to know which one is your favorite. And I also want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who've made this video and all of my videos possible. There'll be a whole bunch of names of my $10 and up patrons on screen, but I want to give a special shout out to my top tier patrons, who are Jordan Carpenter, Heidi Nizer, Jennifer Pingleton, Tabitha Langston, Courtney F, Steffi S, Dot Cosplay, Mo Quintana, and Sharon Cyrus. I really appreciate the support, and I really appreciate you guys watching this video as well. Giving it a like or comment would really help me out if you enjoyed it. And if you want to subscribe to see more content like this as well as a bunch of other stuff, then I'd appreciate that too. So thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to all of you guys very soon.